Hear the name John D. Rockefeller, and you probably think of two things: staggering wealth and ruthless power. I mean, this was a man of huge contradictions. He was the guy who built a terrifying monopoly by crushing anyone in his way. And he was also the father of modern philanthropy, who ended up saving millions of lives. So in this explainer, we're going to dig into both sides of that legacy, how he took his fortune and how he gave it all away. Look, at the turn of the 20th century, John D. Rockefeller wasn't just rich. He was, quite literally, the richest man in the world. He's the one who built Standard Oil into one of the most powerful companies in history and became America's very first billionaire. We're talking about a fortune so massive, it's kind of hard to even wrap your head around it today. So that's the big question, isn't it? Was he a robber baron, a titan of industry who just bulldozed the competition to build an empire? Or was he a visionary philanthropist, someone who completely changed the game when it came to giving back on a global scale? The truth, and this is what makes him so fascinating, is that he was both. Okay, let's dive into the first part of his story, how he actually built that empire. Because see, to really get the philanthropist, you've got to understand the monopolist first. And his methods were, well, systematic, patient, and absolutely relentless. And believe it or not, it all started right here, with a little notebook he called Ledger A. From his very first job as a teenager, he wrote down every single cent. This wasn't just some kid's hobby. Nope. This fanatical attention to detail, this intense financial discipline, became the very bedrock of his entire empire. Now, check this out. This is basically his 4-step playbook for total domination. You can call it the 4 C's. First up, competition. He'd start brutal price wars he knew he could win, bankrupting his rivals. Then came cooperation. Secret backroom deals to fix prices. Third was consolidation. That's when he'd swoop in and buy up all those weakened competitors. And finally, the masterstroke, centralization. He would control every single piece of the process, from the oil well to the lamp in your house. And this wasn't just some business theory. Oh no. In the real world, this strategy had a name, and it was a name that terrified his competitors: the Cleveland Massacre. This was the playbook in action, and it was just devastatingly effective. So let's look at how it all went down. In late 1871, the secret group called the South Improvement Company gets formed. It's basically a deal to give guys like Rockefeller huge secret discounts from the railroads. Now, while the rest of the oil industry was freaking out about this, Rockefeller saw his opening. In less than 6 weeks, he bought out 22 of his 26 competitors in Cleveland. By the time the government finally got around to killing the deal, it didn't even matter. It was too late. He had his monopoly. As you can imagine, people were furious. They called his secret group the Monster and the 40 Thieves. And all that outrage helped create a new kind of journalism, led by a reporter named Ida Tarbell. Now for her, this was personal. Her own father was an oilman who got crushed by Rockefeller. Her 1904 book completely blew the lid off his tactics and eventually helped lead to the breakup of Standard Oil. So the key to making his company so powerful, so untouchable, was this idea of vertical integration. Standard Oil didn't just refine oil. They own the wells, they own the forests for wood to make the barrels, they own the barrel companies, the pipelines, the wagons, everything. No money ever left the system because they were the entire system. So, by the late 1890s, Rockefeller had pretty much retired. He'd won the game. But that victory created this totally new, massive problem. What on earth do you do with that much money? And that question kicked off the second, and you could argue equally revolutionary, act of his life. Just to give you some perspective, by 1913, his fortune was about $1 billion. $1 billion. In today's money, that's hundreds of billions. He was literally wealthier than some countries. His money was making more money faster than he could ever hope to spend it. Now, Rockefeller was a deeply religious man, a devout Baptist. For him, giving money away wasn't a PR stunt, it was a duty. He'd been doing it since his very first paycheck. But now he was just drowning in thousands of letters begging for cash. Trying to answer them one by one the way he always had was, well, in his own words, an impossible chore. This forced him to think differently. He had to move beyond what you might call retail giving, one-off donations, to something completely new. He helped invent what we now call scientific philanthropy. Or, to stick with the analogy, wholesale giving. The idea wasn't just to patch up problems, but to use a huge, organized corporate approach to go after the root causes of society's biggest issues. And he didn't do this alone. Of course he didn't. He found the perfect guy for the job, a former Baptist minister named Frederick T. Gates. Rockefeller saw that Gates had the kind of brilliant, systematic mind that could build a framework for his giving. He basically tasked him with figuring out how to give away his fortune with the exact same efficiency he had used to make it. All right, so how did they actually pull this off? This is the story of how Rockefeller applied the exact same systematic thinking he used to build a business empire to the business of benevolence. So, these were the ground rules for their new playbook. First, they treated charity like a corporation. It had to be efficient, strategic, and based on data. Second, they attacked the root causes of a problem, not just the symptoms. Third, they worked with governments, not around them. They'd use pilot programs to prove that an idea worked on a small scale. And finally, they would build the infrastructure, like a whole public health system that the public could eventually take over and run itself. And all of this came together in one massive organization, the Rockefeller Foundation, started in 1913. And its mission, well, it was as simple as it was massive: to promote the well-being of mankind throughout the world. That's it. No limits, just a mandate to tackle humanity's biggest problems wherever they were. Talk about ambitious, right? And just look at how this thing adapted over 100 years. It's incredible. In the early days, they went after public health, basically wiping out hookworm in the American South. In the 30s and 40s, their funding helped create the entire field of molecular biology. Then they turned to agriculture and funded the work that sparked the Green Revolution, which saved millions from starvation. And more recently, they've been all about global partnerships and what we now call impact investing. So you have these two giant legacies, the taker and the giver. But here's the wild part, the part that makes this story so compelling. They're not two separate legacies. They're completely tangled up together. I mean, think about it. The same kind of brain that could look at the oil industry and see how to control every single step was the same kind of brain that could look at a disease and figure out a system to eradicate it on a global scale. The method was identical. It was just aimed at a different target. And of course, the connection is even more direct than that. Let's be real. One legacy literally paid for the other. All that money made from the ruthless tactics of the taker became the fuel for the world-changing projects of the giver. Without the monopoly, you just don't get the philanthropy on this incredible scale. And that leaves us with a really big, really uncomfortable question, one that's just as relevant today when we look at our own modern billionaires. Can a fortune built through ruthless means be redeemed by all the good it does later? John D. Rockefeller's life doesn't give us an easy answer, but man, it sure forces us to ask the question.